Welcome, everybody. Have you heard the word about vocabulary.com part 2? And our guest presenter today is Claudette Session from Region 5 Educational Service Center near Beaumont, Texas. And I'm joined with my co-host, Olga Escamilla. Once again, I would like to introduce our presenter. Our presenter today is Claudette Session, and she is an instructional coordinator, trainer, ESL, internationally trained professional career navigator. So she wears a lot of important hats. She does work for the Adult Education and Literacy Department of Region 5 Education Service Center in Beaumont, Texas. She teaches English language learners of all levels and directs the newly established Center for Internationally Trained Professionals on the campus of Lamar State College, Port Arthur. Claudette is a member of the Texas AEL SIP cohort and the Center of Applied Linguistics standards setting committees for forthcoming Best Literacy 2.0 and Best Plus 3.0 assessments. She frequently presents pre-conferences, breakout sessions for local, state, and national literacy conferences, and she is a very popular trained PD trainer for us as well. And she actually is one of our standards TOT trainers. And so she may be one of the trainers you see if you receive the Standards 3.0 training. So everyone, please give a round of virtual applause for Miss Claudette Session. Claudette, take it away.
Good morning and welcome everyone to part 2 of this Tech and Tell entitled, Have You Heard the Word About Vocabulary.com? This vocabulary application has something for every area of AEL. And so what we'd like to do as we get started is to find out who is in attendance today, who is in the house, so to speak, so that we make sure we share some parts of this application that apply to all. And the question simply is, what is your role in adult education? Are you an ABE or ACE instructor, an ESL instructor, a career navigator or counselor, a supervisor, or a director? And if we don't have your role listed on the poll, you may place it in the chat box to let us know. So we have a professional development provider. Hi, Paula. Good morning. Thank you. So we just have a few that have not responded. An instructional aide. Joyce, thank you. Enrollment and recruitment specialist. Gabriella, thank you. All right, Anne-Marie, I think you can go ahead and share the results of the poll. It looks like we have a large number of ABE and ACE instructors, ESL instructors, we have some career navigators, supervisors, and we have a digital literacy instructor and a TSI prep instructor as well. Welcome again to all of you. We have one more follow-up question, and that question simply is, did you attend part 1 of the Tech and Tell last week? And you can respond either yes or no, just to give us an idea of who's in the house again. Awesome. All right, thank you all for responding. Anne-Marie, you can share the results. We are so glad that so many of you are returning for part 2, and we welcome all of you who are here for the first time. Just as a brief review for everyone, in part 1 of our Tech and Tell, we talked about the importance of vocabulary, and we reviewed what literacy experts say about how to teach vocabulary effectively. We explored how vocabulary.com is all about growing strong readers, writers, and thinkers by going beyond basic definitions of words to teaching for depth of knowledge, understanding, and retention. We reviewed the 10 question types that this application presents to learners to teach them the vocabulary. So here's one of the question types. This is an example of the fill in the blank question. And notice that after the answer is rendered, there's an accolade, and we talked about the justification that follows the response, as well as additional information about the word, including how to use the word in contextualized sentences, as well as a history of the word. Notice also underneath the question prompt, you see it says source New York Times. And last week we talked first about how all of the sentence examples given in this application come from articles published in newspapers, magazines, and novels. And that if you click on this source reference, it will take you to the exact page where that sentence, contextualized sentence, can be found. Looking at the bottom of this slide, the microphone is there to remind you that if you prefer not to read the example, the question, and the explanation, then you may turn on the audio and have it read to you. And we'll experience the audio once again today, once we move into the application. We also looked and worked hands-on with some of the features of vocabulary.com, including the challenge, the list, and the dictionary. And you see here an example of a dictionary entry. We looked at these in part 1 as well. The dictionary entries for each word give usage examples for different context, different uses of the words in terms of their parts of speech, as well as giving you the opportunity to look at the word families associated with these words, to add these words to a special learning list that you craft yourself, and to share these entries with friends or students. We'll see the dictionary entries very briefly again today. We ended part 1 by playing a vocabulary jam, which is yet another exciting part of this application. It allows you to practice your target vocabulary words in a gaming competition with either people from your own program or with people from throughout the entire world who can join your jam simply by entering a code. Now, before we look at today's objectives, we also want to reflect on how we talked about this application and how well it aligns with our Texas AEL Content Standards version 3. One example is by how it addresses the benchmarks that you see on this slide. We reviewed these last week, as well as the following slide. These benchmarks come from the ESL standards, but if you look throughout the content standards, you'll find an equal number of benchmarks covered by vocabulary.com that apply to ELA and, believe it or not, math as well. Today, our objectives are to interact with the list function of vocabulary.com, and we'll see how it serves as an effective tool for test preparation for standardized assessments such as the TOEFL, the GED, and other HSE exams, the NCLEX, and we'll talk about what those acronyms stand for, the TSI, GRE, and other post-secondary and workforce-based assessments. We'll explore how vocabulary.com may also be used as a tool for mastering the vocabulary required for the comprehension of different genres of literature. And we'll also look at how we can use this application to help our adult education IET students to be successful. Let's begin by taking on that first objective and by looking at some questions that our students may find on exams such as the TOEFL or the GED or the NCLEX or other standardized assessments. I'm going to show you a series of questions. And for each of the questions, you see please type in the chat box any word or words that you feel students would really need to understand, to really know what the question is asking, and to answer it correctly. Let's start with a question from a practice GED social studies test. The question is, which list is in the correct chronological order? Please type in the chat box any critical word or words that you think a learner would really need to know to be able to understand and answer this question. Absolutely, chronological. Thank you for responding. Here's the next question. Now this one comes from a practice GED science test. Nora makes soup by adding some spices to a pot of boiling water and stirring the spices until completely dissolved. Next, she adds several chopped vegetables. What is the solute in her mixture? Please, again, type in the chat box any critical word or words learners would need to know in order to be successful in understanding and answering that question. Absolutely. Solute is the particular word that is highlighted here, but certainly dissolved would be another one that would be important to complete comprehension. Now, the next question was pulled from a practice NCLEX exam. For those who are not familiar with this assessment, NCLEX stands for National Council Licensure Examination. It was developed by the National Council of State Boards of Nursing to test the competency of nursing school graduates. And so this NCLEX, that's the exam that many of our ITPs or our internationally trained professionals who have foreign nursing degrees must take in order to be licensed to practice in the United States. Here's the question. The healthcare provider is preparing a patient for a total colostomy and the placement of an ileostomy. The patient asks where the stoma will be located. The healthcare provider identifies which of the following areas as the correct stoma site. Please type in the chat box any critical word or words a student would need to know in order to be able to successfully respond to that question. Absolutely, excellent. Certainly colostomy, ileostomy, and stoma are critical content academic vocabulary words. And those are the type of words, if you were here from part one, you'll remember that are targeted in vocabulary. Those words that are essential for academic and for workplace environments, business environments. Thank you for responding. Now, we'll look at two more questions. These come from a practice TOEFL exam. For those who are not familiar with this assessment, TOEFL is the acronym for Test of English as a Foreign Language. Many of our ESL professionals, or our ITPs as we call them in Texas, internationally trained professionals, need to take this exam if they want to enter graduate school programs, post-secondary programs, or in some cases, to apply for licensing or credentials for the US workforce. The TOEFL largely focuses on how English is used in an academic setting, and the reading passages, in particular, use formal academic language and high-level vocabulary. Thank you, Juanita, for letting me know that. I'm going to switch a source if it continues. So Anne-Marie, please keep me posted. Here's a practice TOEFL exam question. It's a writing prompt, and the prompt says, Parents are too indulgent and lenient with their children nowadays. Do you agree? Discuss and give examples. Again, please type in the chat box any words you identify as being essential to understanding. Absolutely, indulgent and lenient. And we might look at those words and say, well, we know those pretty well, but think about it from the point of view of a second language learner. Those will be challenging, and those will be words that they will need to study prior to taking that test. For our last question, let's look at this excerpt from another practice TOEFL exam. This comes from the reading section. Which vocabulary words will learners need to know to successfully comprehend the author's message in this excerpt? Monitoring deterioration and other changes in a person's gait is ideal because it doesn't require any expensive technology or take a lot of time to assess, says Bill Theis, Chief Medical and Scientific Officer for the Alzheimer's Association. They found that participants with lower cadence, velocity, and length of stride experienced significantly larger declines in global cognition, memory, and executive function. I'm seeing gait, I'm seeing cadence, gait again, deterioration, velocity, gait, cognition, absolutely, awesome. Yes, certainly, these are key words that students will need to know in order to be successful in responding. And these are big words, but not to worry. Vocabulary.com provides several supports. First of all, vocabulary.com has pre-existing lists for the assessments that we've talked about and for other standardized tests, along with lists for modern and classic literature, for breaking news, for speeches, for historical documents. There are also some just for fun lists if you just want to practice vocabulary leisurely and add to the dictionary you carry around with you every day, meaning your mental dictionary. And then the best part is, if you're not interested in any of these lists, the application will allow you to create your own. There are over 10,000 curated lists. And again, as I mentioned briefly before, the curated list contain essential vocabulary for success in business and academic environments. There are also user uploaded lists. So for example, with your free account, you can compile a list and post it in vocabulary.com. You have the option of sharing it with the public or keeping it private for you and your students. And all lists in this application are customizable. So we'll see when we move over into the application, if there's several words that, no, you don't think you need to practice, or your students don't think they need to practice, you can take them off a list. And if there's several words that are not on the list that you want to include, then you can add them. So in just a moment, we're going to move over to the application to see how all of this works in real time. On this slide, you'll see some of the things that you can do with lists that we're going to actually practice in real time. So I won't read the list now. I'll let you see it, hands or eyes on. So let's move over to the application. As I mentioned last week, when you log into your account, you are immediately greeted by your dashboard of activities. And we talked about the different parts of the dashboard of last week. To access the list function, you simply click on Vocabulary List, which is in the side-by-side menu at the top of the page. Clicking on that list takes you to the Vocabulary List homepage. Now, let's say that we are working with some AEL students, maybe ITPs, ESL professionals who need to take the TOEFL exam. I can search for the TOEFL list by typing in TOEFL in the search bar, or I can search by subject. So for the TOEFL, I would go to test prep. Notice the other categories while we're here: literature, nonfiction, textbooks and curricula. There are textbook list here, morphology and roots, historical documents, speeches, just for fun, and news. When I click on test prep, I'm taken to the test prep homepage. You see their list for the SAT, for the ACT, for the TOEFL. That's what we're interested in. But look at what else is included: essential math vocabulary. This one is an important one for all of us, regardless of what we teach, the language of standardized test. Here in this section, you're going to find those tier 2 words that are used across all content areas, those high frequency words that we see in all domains and that we see in test directions and instructions and prompts. Look at the next part. Since we have so many ABE and A students here, this should make your eyes really excited. GED, mathematical reasoning, GED social studies. We have essential science vocabulary, which is going to contain some of that GED science jargon. For public school learners, there are lists for the STAR exam. Here's another GED language of the test that includes a lot of tier 2 vocabulary, American history and government, which will help also with social studies, and then AP English language and exam and composition for high school students, idioms and expressions, vocabulary for middle school students, and the list goes on. If we scroll down, there are many, many other lists for test. Let's look at the TOEFL exam as our first example. Within the TOEFL exam, I have a choice of which section of list that I want to access. And Jane is asking, do the list contain all possible words a person could possibly come across during a test? And the answer, Jane, is they contain a very comprehensive number of the words, but not all of the words. But then again, if you identify words that are missing, you may create a list with those words and then add them to an existing list or use that as a standalone list, all right? But like we say in everything, nothing is 100%, all right? And Melissa wants to know, after clicking the vocabulary list on top, so Melissa, I went search by topic and I selected test prep, and that took me to the list of tests. And then I went to TOEFL, and I'll show you that again later on. So I can go to essential English vocabulary. I can go to the language of the test or any of the other categories. Let's go to essential English vocabulary. When I go there, I'm greeted by a number of lists. Well, how do I know which list I want to study first? Well, I can click on Explore the Words and watch what happens. The content of each list is shown, and I can scroll through and select which list I want to study first. Which list contains the words that maybe I don't know very well, or maybe the ones that I anticipate are going to be prevalent throughout the exam. So after I scroll through, I can select the list that I want to study from this page, or I can go back to the list and select the list I want. So let's just try list 5. Once I select the list, there are various things I can do. After scrolling through the words, maybe I want to see the hardest words first and the easiest words later on. So I can ask vocabulary.com to arrange them from hard to easy. Or maybe I want to go from easy to hard to build my confidence. And so I can have them arrange it from easy to hard. Or maybe I want them in ABC order, and I simply select that option. Or maybe I feel a little zany and I want them in reverse ABC order. The program can do that as well. Or if I just want them in list order, which is basically ABC order, I can leave it on that option. Next, if I'm ready to practice these words, I simply hit Start Practice, and this will take us to, if it had not logged me out, it would take us to the practice page. So I'm going to log in with my Google account, which is the easiest way, and we'll talk about that in a minute. To log in. All right, and it will take me to the practice option. And this is what we saw in part 1. So first, it's going to start just giving me, this is what's called the definition question or the synonym question. What does caution mean? And so I'm going to select from the 4 options. Remember from last week, I can click on the circle next to my answer, or I can select 1, 2, 3, or 4, A, B, C, D. If you weren't here last week, even though you don't see 1, 2, 3, 4, or A, B, C, D, you can still use those options. So I'm going to select 2, and yay, it gives me the accolade, a justification for the answer, and then additional information about the word. For those who were not here last week, say I don't want to read, then it can be
Spoken audio is now on. Question 1. Press the R key to repeat the description of this word. Press the Q key to repeat the question, or press the space bar to continue.
So say we want to hear the description, I'll press R.
In this question, caution is a noun that means judiciousness in avoiding harm or danger. If you act with caution, it means you are careful. Be sure to use caution when walking across a patch of ice. Otherwise, you might end up sprawling face first on the ground. Ouch. The noun caution can be used to describe something that calls for careful action and the need to avoid risk, such as a volatile political situation that requires extreme caution. The word also has a verb form with a similar meaning. It's a more formal way of saying warn and usually appears with against or that, as in, teachers caution against waiting until the last minute to study, or they caution that effective studying takes a long time. Spoken audio, off.
It's kind of a mechanical audio rendering, but for students who are auditory learners, it's there as an option. And so I would continue practicing these words in rounds until I have mastered them all. Mastery will depend on how well I answer all of the preceding questions, as well as how many words I'm studying at the same time. Now, if I want to get information about any of these words, I can always return to my list, and it takes me back to the list. I can click on the word, and by clicking on each word, it takes me to the dictionary entry for the word. As a reminder from last week, the dictionary will allow me to see how each word is used in various contexts. So say I want to see how abundant might be used in a business context. I can select that option, and there are multiple examples. Notice this one comes from the Seattle Times. So if I want to see exactly the article where that sentence was drawn, I can click on Seattle Times and I can read the entire article. And we mentioned last week all of the opportunities for extending learning that are availed by that option. The dictionary also gives you all of the different parts of speech of a word. It gives you information about the word family, from which the word comes. And it also gives you the option of adding this to a list. So say that I don't want to study the whole list, but I want to add this to a list of words that I'm compiling. I simply click Add List. I can start a new list, or I can add it to one of the lists that I already have in progress. I can also share this with my students or with anyone who is a vocabularian, as they are called, via Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit, Tumblr, and email. I'm going to show you a few more things you can do with list, and then we're going to look at a GED list or an HSE list. Now, let's say that some of the words in this list, and what I'm showing you with this example TOEFL list can be done with any list on vocabulary.com. Let's say that some of these words I want to study and some of them already know, so I don't want them in my learning program. I can copy this list to a new list. Now I'm making this list my own, okay? And I can delete the words that I don't want. For the words that I want to keep, if I don't like the example, that the default example that is given, I can remove that example and I can browse some of the others and select one that I like better. So let's say I like that one better. Now it's added to my learning program, and that's the example that I will see as I study this word. So I can delete any words I don't want and any usage examples, select new ones and place them in. Once I've done that, I simply save the list. Here is where, as I mentioned before, you can make this a shared list, meaning anyone who does a search for essential English vocabulary can access this list, and it will have my user name and initials under it. So my username for this account is Maestra A. And so this list would appear as my list. And that's how you know it's a user list, because it has a name under it. If I want this just to be private for my learning only, then I would select private list.
I'm sorry, but did you give us the root word, Jane says, and Alberto says, how did you copy the list?
Okay, so let me answer Alberto again. Copy the list. Do you see this option here? It just says copy this list to. And so if you want to copy it to a list that you already have made, so I have two lists already. One I've titled 3 words, and one I've titled commonly confused words. I could add it to one of those by simply clicking on 3 words. And so now I no longer have 3 words, but I have like 23 because I added those words to that list. All right. Or you can click the new list option, and then it would be a brand new list. You can also bookmark this list. And when you click bookmark the list, then anytime you log into your account and you see this option here that says my list, well, when you click on my list, you'll see that it's one of the lists in your learning program. And so you just click on it and you have easy access to it. Now, Jane, going back to your question, but did you give us the root word? Would you unmute yourself and clarify what you're asking me, please?
Certainly. I was wondering about words, maybe not your examples, but does vocabulary.com define or give us the meaning of, the words that were derived from other words?
Yes, for a lot of the words it does. It will tell you the origin of the word, and that's where when you see in that explanation after you answer the question, part of that explanation, if it has that information programmed in, it will tell you exactly how the word came to be, when it was first used, and how it became a part of, tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 vocabulary. Okay. And to clarify that a little bit more, I'll show you this in just a minute. Some words in vocabulary.com are called unlearnable. That's the term that they use. And that means that they have not written enough questions and enough examples to be able to teach that word yet. But for all teachable words, you will be able to find that information in the dictionary entry for that word. Did I answer your question, Jane?
Yes, you did. Thank you so much.
Well, welcome. And Michelle wants to know, please explain the shared option again. Is it publicly shared from the site? So I'll show you. So Michelle, I'll click on share this list and say that I'm going to share it through email. Then I don't have Outlook email, but if I did, I could simply, although it has my email address up there, but I haven't set up this account, I would simply write who I'm going to send it to. So say that I'm going to send it to you, Michelle. I'll say M. Simmons, gmail.com, just for funsies. I'm sure that's not your email address since I just made it up on the spot. And I would send it to you, and then you would just click the link, and you would have access to that entry.
I think the one that I had was the shared option when you got ready to save the list and you made it public versus private.
Okay, so that's your question. So is it shared public, private? Yes, from the site. And I'll show you that in a minute. We're going to encounter a list where you're going to see how that sharing publicly works.
Okay.
All right, so give me just a second. All right.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I can also, just very quickly, we saw this last week.
Illuminate.
If I want to work on spelling the words, I can click on spelling bee,
Illuminate.
and it's asking me to spell illuminate, and I can type that in, and it'll say, yeah, you got it right. And notice also it pronounces the word and it gives you the definition of the word. So if the pronunciation isn't clear for you, you can look at the definition and say, oh yeah, that's illuminate, or vice versa. All right, so that's how the spelling bee works. And then the jam, that's again, just the gaming function where you can compete with other people to to learn the words. Let's go again to test prep because we have a lot of ACE and ABE teachers here. Type in the chat box, some of you ACE and ABE teachers, which one of these GED options do you want us to look at? The math, the social studies, or the general language of the test? Someone type in the chat. Which one would you like to glance at? All right, Alberto says math. So here we go, Alberto, thank you. So when I click on math, I can study vocabulary in the areas of numbers and arithmetic, exponents, proportions, probability, algebra, geometry 1 or 2. Let's go to exponents, proportions, and probability. And here are some of the words included in this list. And again, if these aren't the words that your students need to study, and if these are not enough words, you think more need to be added, then in the chat box, someone tell me what you can do based on what we've said so far. What can you do? If you're not satisfied with this list, what can you do in vocabulary.com to make it the list you want it to be? Someone tell me in the chat. Copy and edit, exactly, Claire, that's one option. Or what's another option? Starts with a C. Copy and edit. You can copy the list and edit it. Or don't forget, you can create a list. So let me show you how to create a list. I would go to new list. So anytime you're in the vocabulary list function, you can click new list. And let's say I have some accounting IET students, and I didn't find an accounting list in vocabulary.com that is suitable to help these IET students get ready for their training test or maybe their certification test. But I have the words that I copied from their textbook. So I would simply take those words that I've copied, I would copy them, and I would paste them in the new list option box. So here's my new list option box. I'm going to paste my accounting words there. Then I'm going to go next step, and voila, it tells me here's my list of 10 words. Now notice at the bottom, and I pointed this out last week, it says we're sorry, but there are 2 words on your list that vocabulary.com can't teach yet. It can teach over 15,000 words, but sadly, these aren't among them. Accrual and liquidation. And again, that just means they have not, at this point in time, written enough questions and examples to make those words teachable, what they call learnable or teachable. They will appear in your learning program as definitions, but you won't get the suite of 10 question types. Now, anytime you create a list of your own, you have a lot of customizing authority over that list. So let's look at the word, for example, a solvent. Solvent here has 2 meanings. its function as an adjective and its function as a noun. Well, I'm an accounting student. I'm not really concerned about solvent as it applies to a liquid substance. I'm concerned about solvents meaning as capable of meeting financial obligations. So by clicking in this box, I can take out that option and I'll only be practicing the adjective meaning of solvent. And I can do that for all of the words on my list. If I just want to study charter as a noun, then I can delete the verb option. Anytime I want to add it back, I can simply go to this list, click edit, and put it back in. There's a question that says, so you can't add to the existing list, but you can create a new list, correct? No, you can add to the existing list, but you have to copy that list first as a new list, as a new list, and then add to it. Because if you add to the list that's already here in vocabulary.com, then it's no longer a curated list. It's been changed. So you can edit the list, copy to it, and add to it once you've made it a new list in your own account. Great. All right, so now once I've changed all of the words like I want them to be changed, I have to give this a name. So I'm just going to call this accounting vocab. And then I start learning the words. It starts giving me the words as in the question types. The first question types are always the definitions or the synonym question types, but as you go along, you'll see all of those other question types that we saw last week, the fill in the blank, the polysema sentences, the usage in context, and etc. So I want to show you another type of list you can create. We've talked about the standardized test. We've talked about creating a list for IET students. Now, we know that vocabulary is an essential component of reading comprehension. So if you look on the vocabulary list homepage, look at all of these stories. There are more than 10,000, I believe, curated list in the library of books that are contained within vocabulary.com. It says it right there, 10,000 list. So let's say we're reading Wuthering Heights. I can simply put that in the search box. There's the book. Click on the book and look, there are lists organized by chapters that students can study prior to reading or while they are reading. And they can study these, in the practice format with the 10 question types. They can do a jam with their fellow classmates, or they can do a story bee, a spelling bee, I'm sorry. Also, and they have books of all genres, all right, in vocabulary.com. So for example, Wuthering Heights, here's a contrast. What about the cricket in Times Square? Would such a book be here? Oh, looky, there it is. And again, you can do everything with these lists. Say that you want to edit these lists, you can do that. If you want to look up the words, you can do that by selecting the words. If you want to share it, you can do that as well. Now, say that we want vocabulary for our students for a book that we can't find on vocabulary.com. Again, I would simply go to New List. And notice what it says here. You can type a list of words that you want to learn or paste up to 100 pages of text here. So if you have a book in digital format that you want to use for vocabulary study, then that's an option. So for example, my students and I, my ESL students, have been reading Charlotte's Web. And so I have the book in digital form, as you see on the screen. So what I did, so that they could work on specific vocabulary per chapter, is I copied about 4 pages of text at a time. So here's an example of 4 pages that I copied. And then I went to vocabulary.com to the list function. remember, add a new list, and I pasted that text in. I clicked next step, and wow, there's my list. Now it tells me, and again, they only pull out words that they feel are essential for academic and business environments. And so they found 97 vocabulary words. They selected the 10 most relevant for me based on my learning progress and program. But if I want more, if I'm like 10, I want to study 20. So I can just go and click all of the ones that I want. I can edit all of these. All right, that one just has one usage in vocabulary.com, but let's look at another one like maybe fence. That's going to have more. And so let's say I want just the verb functions, verb meanings. I can edit any of these words. I can add as many as I want. I give this a title, Charlotte's Web, and then I can start learning these words. Michelle is asking, how can we locate free books on the website for the students to read? Okay, so the books are only here for vocabulary purposes. If you want the book and you click on the book, and I'm going to show you what might happen. So I'm going to click on Foodia, and then I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to click here, and this is what's going to happen. It's going to take you to good old Amazon.com and say, if you want the complete book, then here are opportunities for you to purchase it. But no, you don't get the text here. The text you have to get from another source. Vocabulary.com will only help you by giving you list of vocabulary for the particular book. So Michelle, did I answer that question? And notice here, it says buy the book. It won't let you read it, but it will give you options for purchasing. So that's not the neatest feature, but at least it will give you directions for how to get to the book. I want to go back and I want to address, I think it was Melissa or James' question about the sharing of the list and making it public. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in TSI. That's an exam that some students have to take. So when I type in TSI, notice here, it says, here's a list and it was uploaded by Jonathan C. Here's a list that was uploaded by Mr. Cerda. Here's a list that was uploaded by Marisol. So this is what a shared list is. When you share it, it just means it's going to appear when someone does a search, and it's going to have your name under it, your username. And you can select whatever you want for your username, all right? It can be Miss C or Miss D or Miss S if you want to keep your identity private. So the person that asked about the list, please tell me if I answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Sure, you're welcome. Do you have any other questions at this time? Could you provide the web source you found, Charlotte's Web and others, so we can use? Yes, for Charlotte's Web, just go to Google and type Charlotte's Web PDF, and it will come up. Crystal, just go to Google, because that's all I did. I went to Google and I typed in Charlotte's Web PDF, and it'll come up. And for a number of book titles, older books, there are PDF versions available. So what I do is when I think of a title, I just type it in Google and I type PDF by it. And sometimes the PDF is available, sometimes it's not, but sometimes it is. Now, ideally, we would have loved for you guys to have some browsing time in vocabulary.com so that you could find a list of interest, but time is not going to allow us to do that. What I do want to do is show you, if you haven't already, how easy it is to set up a vocabulary.com free account. Simply on the home page, go to sign up. Vocabulary.com is the website address. You can sign up free as a learner and use all of the features that we've looked at today and that we looked at last week. You can also sign up for a 30-day free trial. But do understand that if you free teacher trial, but do understand that if you do that after 30 days, it ends. And if you want to continue the work you've done and save the work you've done as a teacher, you will have to purchase a subscription to vocabulary.com. and the purchase prices vary. And so that's why we didn't go into the teacher features, because they come with a cost. So I encourage you to sign up free as a learner and have your students do so as well. The easiest way, once you click on sign up as a learner, is to just associate it with your Google account if you have one, or you have the option of associating it with your Facebook account, and that makes signing in really easy. It's going to ask you some questions, the age question always, just to comply with the US law. Then there's a second page of questions where they ask you about your organization and other just background information on who you are as a learner. And then you're set and ready to learn. And Michelle says, my students love vocabulary.com. Excellent, Michelle, excellent.
Claudette, since I don't type that that fast, here's a question I think would benefit everybody on a phone, a mobile device. Is it the website or do they have an app?
Okay, so glad you asked that question, Anne Marie. So much. And it was something that I told myself to remember to say. And so you're the angel in my head this morning. That's an excellent question. All right, so for vocabulary.com, you can, on a cell phone or a tablet, or of course, a laptop or desktop computer, you can do your challenge program. Your challenge program is the program that is automatically generated for you and for all learners when you first start. But for the practice function, for the list functions, for all that we saw today, you must use a laptop or a desktop. Cell phones, mobile devices, tablets are not equipped to handle the list functions that we looked at today. Everything we did last week, you can do on your cell phone, meaning the challenge, but the list functions, creating list, etc. No, I'm sorry, you cannot do those on a cell phone or a mobile. So thank you, Anne Marie, for asking. I'm going to take us back briefly here to the PowerPoint. And if you do have any other questions, please let us know. I just want to make sure that we did cover our objectives today. We did see an example of how we can use this with our IET students when we looked at the accounting example. We explored how it could be used for learning vocabulary for different genres of literature. And we used the Charlotte's Web novel as our primary example. And we looked at some TOEFL list, some GED, HSE list, and how we can use those lists to create new lists, to share with our students, to practice the words, and to spell the words and the like. I do want to mention that in these two Tech and Tells, again, we only highlighted the free features of this application. There are some things that you can do with a teacher account that we didn't touch on because they do come at a cost, but do keep that in mind. Thank you all for your great participation today and your feedback. Now that you have heard the word about vocabulary.com, I hope that you and your students, like Michelle's students, will be able to use this application to learn, to retain, to spell, and of course, to jam with vocabulary.